All right, everybody. Welcome to the Truth Hertz Show. Happy Thursday. Gotta love these weathermen. Yesterday they said rainy, and it was actually sunny all day. They said sunny for today, and now it looks rainy. Kind of like politicians, huh? We gotta rank the weathermen up there with politicians. Say one thing and do the absolute opposite. Yeah. Kind of like the topic we're going to be talking about today. Those who pay attention to mainstream media got an entirely different story from what actually happened that fateful day in 1990. Oh boy, wait a minute. When was it? I can look at my notes here. I forgot the date. April 20th of 1999. I almost said 97. It was 1999. The famous and horrific, tragic Columbine incident. What exactly went on at Columbine? Folks, the evidence of government perpetration of this event is so overwhelming and so absolutely undeniable. If you're not familiar with this, your eyes are going to pop out of your head. It's unbelievable. We were lied to. We were suckered once again. Of course, the same can be said about a whole lot of other things, like Virginia Tech, for example. We're going to be looking at that next week. Tomorrow I have a guest, so I won't get around to that, but I'm planning on Monday. Got a guest Tuesday as well. On Monday, or if I don't finish this show today, I'll finish this on Monday, and then I'll get started on the Virginia Tech. But the next two shows, this one and the one after at least, I'm going to be covering these two events. The parallels are just astonishing. Unmistakable. You can't miss this. We see the exact same things going on, the same lies, the same cover-ups, the events themselves, what actually happened at these two schools, are very, very close. And it's just amazing. You know, I suspected there was something wrong with Columbine. In fact, I knew there was. But I never realized just how incredibly outrageous it was, how extensive the lies were regarding what happened there. All right, guys, short break, and we're going to launch into this when we get back. Stick with us. On second thought, I thought I heard the music coming in for the break. I guess not. It was a truck going by. Anyway, this is major stuff. Like I said, if you're not familiar with it, you've got to become familiar with it. If you already are familiar with it, keep listening, folks, because I'm going to go into this in a lot of detail, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that you haven't heard before. So you definitely want to keep tuned in. You know, this is something we need to be aware of because, you know, these things seem to be going on all the time. The two major ones, of course, are Virginia Tech and Columbine, but there's been a lot more, and unfortunately there's going to be a lot more. They have an agenda behind this, and we're going to talk about that later on in the broadcast. Stick with us. All right, guys, welcome back to Truth Hertz. The tragic shooting at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado on April 20th, 1999, though now outdone by the Virginia Tech shooting, was at that time the worst type of incident of that nature in the entire country, in the history of this country. It left many with scars that are still etched in the minds of those who watched the story unfold in the national news. But there's a lot of problems with the official story, as I said before the break. Many problems that unfolded in the press, mostly in the local press. Most of these problems you never heard in the national press, and that's always the way it goes, isn't it? When there's a tragedy like Katrina, for example. A lot of stuff was reported in local media that you never heard in the national media, like the Oklahoma City bombing, for another example. Anyway, there were many conflicting reports in the local media that totally conflicted with the national media. For example, a Denver Post article reported that shots were still being fired in the school a full 3.5 hours after the two gunmen were said to have died. Obviously, that's a big problem. We're not going to report that. We'll just sweep that under the rug. We don't want people to know about that. But it was reported in the local press 3.5 hours after the patsies, let's call them, because that's what they were, Klebold and Harris. 3.5 hours after they were dead. Now, there's two problems here with that. Two very obvious problems that leap right in your face. One of them is, obviously, if they were the only two perpetrators and they were already dead, who were these other shooters? And the other problem is, how could there be shooting going on at all 3.5 hours later? Where in God's name were the police? Also, Sheriff John Stone had initially reported that there were other shooters involved, aside, again, from the two main ones, Klebold and Harris. But he has since mysteriously backed away from that statement as though he never made it. This is like the, I forget his name now, but there was a professor from University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, the afternoon of 9/11. He came out and said, these explosive, these towers falling the way they did, it looked like explosives were used. He's a controlled demolition expert. He said there's no question, after viewing these tapes, they have all the classic indicators of a controlled demolition. It couldn't be anything else. But several days later, he retracted, or actually he denied ever saying it, and changed his whole story. Why? Well, it's obvious why, because his department gets $12 million in federal grant money every year. They must have gotten a little phone call. Anyway, this same sheriff, John Stone, was quoted by the Associated Press on April 20th, the day of the attacks, as making this statement. We had initial people there right away, but we couldn't get in. We were way outgunned. Way outgunned. So there you go, folks. Supposedly there were only two kids doing this, but he said we were way outgunned. We couldn't get in there. Well, that might partially answer the question as to why it took so long for an effective police response. But, why weren't they getting more police in there? If you got a situation like that, you're going to have more law enforcement, get the feds in there or whatever, right? How come this wasn't being done? Why wasn't the place swarmed with agents? They certainly did that at Waco, didn't they? Sorry, folks, it just doesn't add up already, but stick around, we're just getting warmed up. But already we can see some very serious problems here. How could they be outgunned with only two students? There must have been other people. Who were they? And why aren't we being told about them in the national media? Oh, there definitely were. Wait till you hear, about that when I go into that in more detail in a few minutes here. Anyway, along this same line, the May 2000 issue of Playboy magazine quoted Terry Manwaring, commander of the Jefferson County SWAT team. And here's what he said. I just knew the killers were armed and were better equipped than we were. How could that be? Better equipped? What, just two kids with, sure they had automatics or semi-automatics, but nothing that the police didn't also have. How could they be better equipped? Hello? It was also initially reported in the local press that numerous students had seen more than two gunmen. But all of this has been brushed away and swept under the rug by the national media. We're going to be taking a close look at some of these eyewitness accounts, folks, that don't jibe with the official story. But first, let us look at what the official account of that day's events looks like. students Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, according to the official story, planned and executed this attack alone. Very important to understand that. We have been told and continue to be told that they operated alone. Nobody else was involved in the planning or in the execution, certainly not in the execution of these attacks. Nobody else was involved, we're told. Yeah, we are told that some other people bought guns for them since they were minors, but, they didn't really know what their intent was, So the buyers had no idea, whatsoever what they were up to, so that, once again, they operated completely alone as far as the actual planning went, and certainly as far as the execution went. Nobody else had any hand in it. The two gunmen were dressed in black trench coats and pants, as we're told. The shooting started at approximately 11:19 a.m., and by 12:08 p.m., at the latest, Harris and Klebold were dead, having killed themselves after executing the attacks. This is the official story. But as we'll see, it just doesn't add up. In fact, it's absolutely freaking possible. Okay. Let's move on to talk about the bomb thrower in the white T-shirt. Outside the school, numerous eyewitnesses saw a young man dressed in a white T-shirt and blue jeans who was taking part in the attack. He was said to have been seen giving a signal to start the rampage, and then he had thrown some type of explosives. Talk more about him when we get back, folks. The story is full of holes. All right, guys, welcome back. I was talking before the break about this bomb thrower in a white T-shirt. This same individual, who was a youth, was later seen together with the other two perpetrators, Klebold and Harris, on the school grounds. So there's no question that this was, in fact, a third individual. It was not one of the two, the only two that we were told were involved. On the day after the attacks, April 21st, USA Today had this to say: beyond the two dead gunmen, students described seeing another youth dressed in a white T-shirt throwing bombs that looked like soda cans, or pipe bombs, perhaps. A youth matching that description later was seen being led away by police. Now, why was this issue dropped? This actually was reported in this national journal, but, like 9/11, as time went on, things that were initially reported the day of 9/11 or even a day or two after were dropped. For example, I mentioned this a few days back, a week ago or whatever, CNN reported, actually earlier this week when I was talking about Flight 93, CNN reported 2 days after 9/11 that another debris field was discovered miles away from Shanksville, where they were finding huge airplane pieces, sections of fuselage and engine. And they said, obviously, the wind didn't blow this stuff, miles away. The wind couldn't blow it at all unless we're dealing with a tornado or something. So where did, they said this obviously raises some big questions. Anyway, my point is that was dropped. You never heard anything about it again. In the national media, that was the only time you heard mention of this, and then it was dropped like it never happened. Yet CNN confirmed that they got word from investigators, including the FBI, local and state authorities as well, that it definitely was debris from Flight 93. But then they dropped it and you never heard any more about it. So sometimes conflicting stories do, that don't jive with the official story, do make it into national media. But it's dropped, and then you never hear anything more about it. They act like it was never reported. Here's, again, another example. USA Today did report the day after the Columbine attacks that there was this third person. So, what happened now? Did people change their mind? Oh, no, forget it. Forget I said that. I didn't actually see it after all. I guess I was hallucinating that day. Come on. Anyway, student Chris Wisher gave this sworn statement on April 20th, the day of the attack, at 1:30 p.m. Here's what he said. Me and my friends were about 100 yards away from the people. There were 3 of them, 2 wearing trench coats and 1 wearing a white shirt. We heard what we thought was a gun and started running. Then we figured that they were fireworks and went back. We saw one of them aim a gun at us and started shooting at us. We heard the gunshots going by our heads, so we fell to the ground. We got up and saw the kid in the white shirt throw what looked like grenades onto the roof. That is when we got back up and started running. So here we see corroboration here of the other testimony I read. Also seeing this third person in a white T-shirt throwing bombs, some type of explosives, onto the roof of the school. Why no mention of him again anymore in the mainstream media? Why has this been dropped? Why are we still being told it was only those 2? Kind of like, again, 9/11. We're being told that it was just the 19 hijackers. Well, it turns out there weren't any hijackers at all. That whole story is fabricated. But, this is what happens, folks. They fabricate, a story. They pick some patsies, and that's it. Case closed. Dropped it because, after all, the experts at the FBI have investigated this, and there's no need to look any further. This is what happened. Based on the sworn statement of another student, John Apodaca, the following notes were taken at 1:30 the same day. Me and my friend were at the soccer field, and we heard what sounded like firecrackers. Saw 3 subjects near school shooting. 1 threw bombs onto roof. This is someone who took these notes down from a student giving a testimony, very quickly. 1 threw bombs onto roof of school. Subjects shot shotguns toward him and his friend. He and his friend ran to a house and called 911. He saw a gunman ducked down with a shotgun in Weaver Park. Subjects were white male, 2 wearing black trench coats, black berets, black pants, black army boots, black T-shirts, carrying shotguns. He has seen them at school before, but did not find them in the yearbook he was shown. The third subject had light brown hair, wearing a white T-shirt and jeans, throwing bombs onto the roof. Saw one explode. Apodaca has not seen him at school before. So there you go. There was this other youth, this third youth, but apparently he wasn't a student at the school at Columbine. He came from elsewhere. But there you go, another testimony. And notice the consistency here. These were people that were interviewed right there on the spot, as officials came in. And they were all telling the same story. So, you can't write this off as, how people who see crimes occur, sometimes they're so distraught and stressed, they tend to get the details mixed up. No, there's no mixing up of details here. There's absolute precision now with these 3 testimonies I just read. But there's more. A freshman, William Arapkiles, gave his sworn statement on May 5th. He was in the soccer field and heard firecracker sounds coming from the area of the cafeteria. He said that he looked toward the school and saw 3 people near the west entrance to the North Main Hall. Billy stated that two of the subjects were wearing trench coats, and the third was wearing, again, a white shirt. According to Billy, the two subjects with the trench coats had guns. He did not notice a gun on the subject with the white shirt. The one in the white shirt was nervously pacing back and forth and was about 5 feet away from the ones in the trench coats. He said that he was too far away to recognize the subjects, but nevertheless, his testimony jives perfectly with the other ones. A third suspect in a white shirt. A sophomore, Donald Arnold. Some of this seems redundant, but it's necessary to hear these multiple testimonies, and I don't even have all of them here cited in my notes, just some of the main ones. But it's necessary to be a bit redundant, so you see that we're not just dealing with one or two or three. There's tons of witnesses. Even eyewitness testimonies from teachers as well, as I'll get to later, whose stories don't jive with the official one. Anyways, I'll get back to some of these other testimonies, folks. White T-shirted bomb thrower when we get back, guys. Stick with us. Okay, folks. Back to the Truth Hurts show. We'll look at yet another testimony of this man in the white shirt throwing bombs. This one is a sophomore, Donald Arnold Jr., who gave his testimony on May 11th. He said that he was on the soccer field at the time. He looked toward the school and saw a short, pudgy male wearing a white T-shirt and throwing something onto the roof of the school near the electrical transformers. Arnold heard an explosion and saw dust on the roof soon after. He could provide no detailed description of this person, but he said that he never saw him with a gun. So we just have Klebold and Harris being seen with guns. The third white T-shirt wearing individual just had these explosives. Arnold then saw another male, who he could not identify, shooting toward the senior parking lot. This individual was standing on the upper level north of the parking lot and near the school, approximately 30 yards southwest of the first male. Moving on to another testimony here. Patrick Neville, another student, gave his testimony on May 6th. He described the first gunman as tall with a black trench coat, dressed all in black, carrying a long gun. He said that the second gunman was clearly a white male with a white shirt, blue jeans, and was seen throwing something onto the roof. Another sophomore, Mike Kenny, gave his statement on May 1st. He and a few friends were also on the soccer field when they heard what sounded like firecrackers going off near the library. Oops, hold on one second here, folks. Anyway, they also saw two people in dark trench coats, along with another guy in a white shirt, walking a distance from the other two. Kenny also said that one of the men in the trench coats had fired at him and his friends, causing them to run. When Kenny looked back, he saw an explosion and smoke on the roof near the area of the two trench coat suspects. This, as I said, this redundancy, folks, is necessary to show how consistent these accounts are, and thus how false the official story is. So I just cited, 8, 10, whatever, maybe a dozen different testimonies, all talking about this white trench-coated third person, and he was throwing bombs. We're just told once again about two people, Klebold and Harris, using guns. Another student, Jonathan Cole, was interviewed on June 1st. Cole had just finished his fourth period class and walked out of the school via the doors located on the upper level, just north of the library of the west side. He had met up with Abodaka, that I mentioned earlier, and Wisher, who I also mentioned earlier, when suddenly he noticed two students in dark trench coats. One wore a dark ski mask with a large hole in it. Both were tall, and one had brown, puffy hair, he said. He saw that they were soon joined by a third male in a white shirt who had been walking a distance away from them. Then he heard the one in white yell to the other two, "Go, go." Apparently, he was a coordinator of what was going on. Next, he saw the two in the trench coats draw weapons. One bore a shotgun, while the other carried a semi-automatic. They started shooting at students below. He heard the students below screaming and saw one of them fall to the ground. He ran off in a westerly direction, and when he looked back, he saw the one in white throwing what looked like bombs onto the roof near the area of the library, and he heard some of them going off. Once again, consistency, consistency. How can it be, folks, that we are still to this day being told it was only the two perpetrators, i.e. the patsies, Klebold and Harris, that were responsible, when we have, and I'm not done, there's many more. I've got several more here to read. Again, redundancy, preponderance of evidence is vital in a case like this. When you see many people saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over, obviously something's wrong with the official story. I should point out, too, that many people reported seeing a man in a three-piece shirt walking around the grounds before, during, and after the attacks, wearing sunglasses and toting a clipboard, taking notes. Who was this man, and what was he doing there? Once again, a three-piece suit, wearing sunglasses, walking around with a clipboard. Can you believe this? This was some high-level operation, folks. And I think they were trying to see, what the response would be to help them out with future plans, with future operations of this nature. Anyway, let's go on to Jessica Gertz, another student. She gave her story on May 18th. She said that she was in the cafeteria when when her and her friends had heard someone yell that there was a fight. So everyone got up to look out the window. She saw two people in dark trench coats and another again in a white T-shirt. When she realized what was actually happening, she ran out of the cafeteria and out of the school on the other side of the building from where the attackers were. On May 25th, Stephanie Haney, another student, gave her account. She also described seeing the man or tall student in the white shirt accompanying the two students in the dark trench coats, Harris and Klebold, both of which she knew from school and had recognized. But again, just like the others who testified about this man in the white T-shirt, she did not recognize that individual. He came from elsewhere. Anyway, Anne Marie Kelly was a sophomore who gave her story on May 5th. She, too, described the third person as wearing a white T-shirt and throwing explosives onto the roof. We'll look at one more testimony here. This one is another student, Nathan Vanderaw, who gave his testimony on April 30th. While eating lunch in the cafeteria, he and two friends heard an explosion outside. When they looked out the window, they saw two trench coat-wearing students accompanied by a third accomplice wearing, of course, a white shirt. This eyewitness also described the one dressed in white as throwing some type of explosives onto the roof, which were the source of the explosion that first caught the attention of himself and his friends. So there we have it. What are we looking at now? Upwards of 20 eyewitness testimonies. Like I said, this isn't all of them. There were more. But clearly, the official story is bunk. So you got to ask yourself, why? What are they hiding? They're obviously hiding something. These testimonies have been ignored by the national media. Why? What was going on here? We heard nothing of this young man in the white T-shirt, and certainly nothing in the national press about this three-piece suit-wearing individual with sunglasses. Who was he? What was he doing? Anyway, now let's look at another individual. So far we've been just talking about a third perpetrator in the white T-shirt. There was yet another one, a fourth perpetrator. This one is called the Acne shooter. So now we have three shooters and one with grenades or pipe bombs or whatever. A third shooter seen by several students. This person was neither Harris nor Klebold. That is very clear. The consistent description given of him was one who had, again, acute acne, bad teeth, long face, tall height, long hair, and a pigeon-toed manner of walking. We'll talk about those eyewitness testimonies when we get back, folks. All right, folks. Back to the Hertz show. You shouldn't be surprised to hear about these various other individuals involved in the Columbine attacks. At the opening of the show, don't forget, I read testimonies from, the local, the sheriff or whatever, and a few other individuals, some police officers who said that they were outgunned, outnumbered. All right, guys, my apologies. I have no idea what that was. Very strange. Got cut off. The power went out for a split second. This happened a couple weeks ago. Just for a split second, the power went off. Very, very bizarre. That almost never happens. And yet, it's happened twice now in the past couple of weeks while I'm doing a show. That's very strange. Anyway, bear with me for a minute. I gotta reopen my word processor here and figure out where I left off. Sorry about that. Absolutely bizarre. Anyway, give me a second here while I tell you, man. What a world. Our little Orwellian world that we live in. Let me just find out where I left off here, folks. Okay, a friend of mine just alerted me that I'm coming back in loud and clear. Thanks, man. All right. I got my page open back up here. Just let me find where I left off. Jeez, man, oh man, what a pain in the neck. Okay, I was talking about the Acne shooter, I believe. Yeah, okay, here we go. Okay, one student who saw this individual with acne was a junior. His name was Bijan Monte, who gave his account on April 30th. Or she did, I guess. It's a she. Sorry about that. Bijan. I guess that's a woman's name. Anyway, gave her account on April 30th. She said that she was near the cafeteria when the shooting had started, and that she looked over and saw one of the gunmen, stating emphatically that this gunman was not one of the ones mentioned on TV, i.e. Klebold and Harris. She thought that she saw fireworks sparkling on the sidewalk, and then saw a guy in a trench coat coming down the hill. He then walked over to where three students were lying on the ground and stood over two of them. She described the third gunman as wearing a dark trench coat like the other two, but that he had on a black baseball cap turned backwards. His face and neck were long, and he had a narrow chin. His teeth were crooked, with an obvious overbite. His face was covered with acne, she said, and what looked like deep pock marks. So now we're looking at 4 individuals, not 2. Interestingly, she also, Biden, whatever, also stated that she recognized who this third shooter was and even named him by name in her statement. However, his name was redacted when her statement was released. Isn't that interesting, boys and girls? So now we have a person actually named other than Klebold and Harris, and they blacked it out when her statement, public, affidavit sworn statement was released to the public. Blacked it out. Are you going to tell me now that we're not dealing with a cover-up here? Oh, but hold on to your seats. It gets worse. It gets more Orwellian. Did you know it was this bad? Did you know we were lied to this much about what went on with Columbine? But should you be surprised when we see the government pulling off things like 9/11? Should we be surprised when we look at the horrific criminal negligence that went on in the wake of the Katrina attacks? Should we be surprised? Anyway, let's go on to another eyewitness testimony. This one is from Crystal Archuleta, a junior. She also saw this person, having given her statement on April 27th, which was a week after the attacks. She said that she and friends ran into the parking lot to check on a wounded girl who is today, unfortunately, paralyzed from being shot. She described seeing a male with a dark trench coat and a black cap turned backward, just like Biden. She saw him throw a pipe bomb onto a hill near the cafeteria. At the time she saw him, he did not have a gun, and soon after she witnessed him enter the building, walking in a pigeon-toed manner. Again, just like we heard from another eyewitness. He walked through a door near the library. Here again, the name of this mystery person was given, but it was also redacted here as well. Why? She recognized him. She mentioned him by name, but we can't know what his name is. In fact, they don't even admit that this third person existed at all. Although anybody who takes the time can go look at these sworn testimonies and see that there was there were several other people that were, mentioned in these testimonies. But the official story is just Klebold and Harris. So forget this, and forget those little black markings you see there. Just shut up, believe the official story, and move on. Unbelievable, guys. When are we ever told the truth about anything? That's the question. Lacey Smith, another student, gave her story on May 4th, talking once again about this same acne-infested individual. She not only mentioned this mysterious third person once again by name and describing him precisely as the others had, but she opened her yearbook and pointed him out. And I'll pick up there when we get back, folks, with a short break. Stick with us. All right, guys, back to the second hour. Here's hoping my power doesn't go out again. I just thought of this, interestingly. I remember this happened, a week or two ago. But I wasn't even at my home when that happened. It's at my girlfriend's house. That makes it even more strange. What are the chances of that? Your power going out for a split second and coming back on, just enough to shut your computer down, but at 2 different locations. Anyway, it's like the Twilight Zone. Coming back to this eyewitness testimony of Lacey Smith. She described seeing this third shooter, the acne-infested shooter. May 4th, she gave her testimony. Once again, she not only mentioned this mysterious third person, describing him precisely as the others had, but she opened her yearbook and pointed him out. But once again, his name was redacted from the report. She also did not see him with a gun, as the others had said, but believed that he had one concealed under his trench coat. Now, this is interesting. She also said that this third shooter was a close friend of Bobby Craig, another student, who later, so we're told, killed his father and then committed suicide. Did you catch that? My. Now, isn't that a classic little coincidence there? How many times do we see suicides occurring around people that have information that blows government lies out of the water? How many times have we seen that? Or plane crashes. Plane crashes and suicide seem to be the two favorite methods of elimination of el governmente, of individuals, that can expose their little scams. Unbelievable, guys. This acne-infested third shooter, who was identified by name, but yet the name was blacked out of the report, and who was pointed out in the yearbook, was close friends with this Bobby Craig guy who allegedly committed suicide and shot his father too. Apparently, Daddy knew something, that his son had shared with him, so they both had to be eliminated, and they make it look like a murder/suicide. Over and over and over again. And almost always, when we hear about these suicides occur under impossible conditions, like Gary Webb, for example. Used to work for the San Jose Mercury. He's the one who wrote, amongst other things, he wrote a book exposing the CIA's involvement. They were the ones doing it. A big drug operation that was going on during the Iran-Contra affair. CIA was smuggling billions of dollars worth of China White Coke into this country. Not just China White, they would bring it up mostly from Colombia and Nicaragua, actually. But anyway, the China White deal was during the Vietnam War. Sorry, got those two stories mixed up. But anyway, his suicide, he had 2 bullet wounds in his head, folks. How do you shoot yourself twice in the head? Short break. Stick with us. We'll be right back. I mentioned the China White fiasco before the break. Yeah, that's an interesting story. The CIA was stuffing the cadavers of the fallen soldiers in Vietnam with China White, bags of China White, right in the dead bodies, to smuggle them back into the country. Unfreaking believable. Anyway, but yeah, here was Gary Webb exposing, the CIA's drug smuggling ring going on during the Iran-Contra affair. That was the real scandal. Not that just that they were trading, selling weapons to the Condonistas, or Sandinistas, the Contras. I'm sorry, it's Condonistas. Yeah. The Contras against the Sandinistas. I'm tired today, folks. Don't mind me. I just don't get enough sleep these days. Not only were they giving weapons or selling weapons to them and then using that money to pay off the Iranians, but the real scandal is they were actually selling dope on the streets. They still are, of course. They always have been. The CIA is the biggest drug smuggler operation in the country. But anyway, this what's his name? Gary Webb from the San Jose Mercury. He had written a book documenting all of this, exposing it. And, of course, over the years, he was involved in all kinds of other investigations of scandals with the CIA and other, high-ranking government bureaucracies. And finally, they said he committed suicide. I think it was December of 2004. 2 months later, of course, they said the same thing about Hunter S. Thompson. Hunter S. Thompson was about to break a big story regarding the collapse of the Twin Towers. He said he came on to some shocking evidence, something that the public was not privy to that could prove once and for all, beyond the shadow of any doubt, that the Twin Towers came down via explosives. Well, we don't need any more proof. That's, already very obvious. But nevertheless, I wonder what he found. That would have been very interesting. He was about to break the story, and he suspected something might happen to him. So the night before he committed suicide, nod, nod, wink, wink, he called a friend of his at the Canadian Globe and Mail, told him about his findings, and he said, I just wanted to let you know, if something happens to me, I'm not suicidal. I have a feeling, though, that, someone's going to push me under a bus or something, he said. As you might imagine, this is a big, hot story. And I know I'm being followed. I suspect something might happen, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the next day, sure enough, this was in the Canadian Globe and Mail. His friend, who was a reporter, told the whole story. The very next day, after getting that phone call, he turned up dead, and they said it was a suicide. Suicide, 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 and plane crashes. But a lot of suicides. Bruce Ivins is another one. You remember that story? Ooh. The anthrax attacks. Remember how the FBI was not coming out with anything about its anthrax investigation? Judicial Watch had sued them in June of 2002 for information about their anthrax investigation, and they said, we couldn't go any further because we ran into top military secrets. Well, yeah, of course. The strand of anthrax that was mailed out came from an Army research lab in Detroit, working in conjunction with Ames of Iowa, Ames University. Anyway, years and years went by, and nothing was coming out of this investigation, but the public wasn't, or at least several groups in Washington weren't letting the FBI drop the issue. They kept pressuring them. So finally, the FBI realized, son of a gun, we're going to have to make up some story. We need a patsy here that we can say did it. So that's what they did. They came out and said this guy, Bruce Ivins, was responsible for the anthrax mailings. He worked at Detroit. But, folks, I forget his name now, but there was a UN weapons inspector who came forward shortly after the FBI, fingered this guy as being responsible. And this former UN's weapons inspector said, look, he said, there's only about 10 people on planet Earth right now that could produce that type of complicated strand of anthrax, and I am one of them. But let me tell you, it would take me a team of 100 people a whole year to develop that complex type of strand. This guy, whose area of expertise isn't even in that field, is said to have done it over a period of 3 weeks, only working, a few days a week, a few hours in each day, single-handedly. I mean, he says it's absolutely ridiculous. It's impossible. Well, guess what happens to Mr. Bruce Ivins when it comes time for him to give his testimony in court? Bang! He commits suicide. Oh, yes. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. And as always, the American sheeple, they buy it every flippin' time. If it wasn't so darn disgusting and despicable, it would kind of be humorous because it's, these guys are so freaking predictable. Oh, here's a guy about to give his testimony that's going to blow the lid off the government story. Oh, suicide again. And every single time, nobody does anything, nobody says anything. Dear God, it's the Twilight Zone. Anyway, Lacey Smith, as I said, she said that this third shooter was a close friend of Bobby Craig, and it turns out Bobby Craig allegedly kills his father and then commits suicide. Right. Sure he did. Then we have Brian Fry, another student who was interviewed on May 11th. He described this third shooter, the acne or zit-infested student, in the same fashion, and, no surprise, named him by name, which, can you guess? It was redacted from his sworn testimony. Now, how many is that? Is that the third one or the fourth one? I lost track here, but nevertheless, all of these students have named this guy by name, pointed him out in the yearbook, and it's been redacted. Unbelievable, guys. Caitlin Sue Place, a freshman, was questioned on May 14th. She was in the cafeteria when a bunch of kids suddenly dived under tables when the shooting began. She dived under a table as well, but then got up on her knees to peer outside to see what was going on. She saw a person outside coming down the stairs. It was the third shooter firing a rifle. He was tall with a dark trench coat and a backward facing baseball cap on his head. He started firing at people outside with his rifle, she said. Anyway, there's more to that, but I'll get to that when we get back, folks, on a short break. Stick with us. All right, guys. Back to the Hertz show. I'm continuing here with this sworn statement by eyewitness Caitlin Sue Place, a freshman who also saw this third shooter. Fourth suspect, but third shooter, which, of course, we never heard about in the national media. In her statement, and here we go once again. I bet you can predict what I'm going to say. In her statement, she also positively identified this individual, having recognized him from a debate class she said she had been in with him the previous year. But, as you might guess, his name was omitted. Why? There's two people now, folks, that have been mentioned with numerous witnesses, right? And, not only are their names not being allowed to be released, but they deny that there were even these other individuals taking part in the shootings. Why? Why is El Governmente covering up for these murderers, these co-conspirators? I'll tell you why. Because the government is the ultimate conspirator in this whole thing, like it is in so many other things that have gone on over the years. While the American public snoozes away, El Governmente engages in the most heinous crimes. Isn't it astonishing, folks? The ones at the top rungs of law enforcement in this country are the biggest violators of the law. Isn't that nice? Gives you sort of a cozy feeling inside, doesn't it? The suspect outside the science room. Let's move on to talk about him now. Here we have a fifth suspect. Several students who were holed up in a science room described seeing Klebold with an older man, at least in his 20s, who had dark hair with blonde streaks, carrying a tan-colored sawed-off shotgun, and had set off some type of explosive device. His description does not match that of any of the other accomplices described above. So here we have a fifth accomplice, a fifth individual, who, as you might guess, has his existence denied, and his name has not been allowed to be released. Again, they don't even admit that he existed, never mind mention his name. Anyway, let's look at some of the eyewitnesses of this individual. Jennifer Smull was one student who saw this man, whose statement, for some reason, was not dated. But anyway, she was quoted verbatim as follows. I saw a senior stand outside our classroom door. I knew that he was the shooter. Then I saw an adult. Oh, my light's blinking. I hope the power's going to go out again. If it does, be patient. I will be back. Unbelievable. Anyway, she said, I saw a student stand outside our classroom door. I knew he was the shooter. Then I saw an adult, thought he was in his 30s. I thought he was a cop until he held up a sawed-off shotgun. Then he and the senior tried to break into the room where a shot teacher went, a teacher who was shot, I guess. When they couldn't get in, they ran away, shooting down the hall once or twice. Here's another eyewitness of this individual, Erin Walton. She gave the following testimony on the day of the shootings at 3:40 p.m. She said, "We saw two guys standing in the doorway, backs to us, heard them fire 2 to 3 shots, don't know where, possibly toward the science teacher's room. Then they left. One of the guys was tall, long black hair, wearing all black. The other one looked like he was in his 30s. So clearly an adult. So, some said 20s, maybe late 20s, 30s, early 30s, whatever. Another student who saw this man was Jonathan Vandermark, who related a story on May 4th. Though the window in the door, through the window in the door, he saw two individuals in a hallway taping, tapping? Oh, wait a minute, I didn't write this down right, sorry folks. He was taping, okay, yeah, he was, sorry. He was taping a foot-long explosive device to the wall out in the hall. He described the first one as being tall and skinny with long dark hair, wearing a black shirt, black pants, and a black hat on backwards. He didn't know this particular individual, but said that he had seen him around the school before. He described the other one in the same manner as the other eyewitnesses had done. So, perfect harmony in these testimonies is yet another one, folks, another individual. On April 27th, David Eagle, another student, gave his account of this same person. He was hiding behind some overturned desks, peeking through a door window out into the hall. He saw one of the killers holding a sawed-off shotgun. He had dark hair with blonde streaks. There you go. This is obviously the same individual described by the others. Now let's look at yet another one, folks. I lost count now. Where are we at? Is this number 5 or 6? This one was seen wearing camouflage pants. He was also a gunman, reported by several students, again wearing camouflage pants, which did not match the descriptions of any of the other assailants. Adam Foss is one such student who saw this individual. He gave his account on April 28th. He said that he saw a teacher, David Sanders, get shot. He couldn't see the face of the killer, but he clearly saw his lower body. He was wearing camouflage pants and high black boots. Jennifer Small, again, another student we quoted from earlier, she saw this individual as well. She even identified him by name, but this name, no surprise, was redacted from her statement. Once again, we see another assailant being identified by name, positively identified, and the name has been withheld. Folks, I don't need to spell this out, do I? We're dealing with a government-orchestrated conspiracy. Once again, why? We'll get to that later, but first let me finish building the case here. Patrick Robert Vassar, another freshman, saw this individual as well, relating his testimony on April 30th. But he did not get a good look at his face to identify who he was. Of course, it wouldn't matter anyway, since his name would have been redacted. But he did describe him as, wearing the same clothes, the camouflaged army-type pants. Okay, now we're going to go on to another one. Again, I lost track. Is this number 7 or 8? Or, who knows? But this one is the rooftop shooter. Yet another one. Boy, it's starting to make sense now. Remember, we were told by some other, officials, police and whatnot, that they were outgunned, right? Outnumbered. Yeah. But who are these people? Why aren't we being told about them? Be right back, guys. All right, folks. back to the Truth Hurts show. Let's go on now to talk about some of these eyewitness accounts of the rooftop shooter. According to the official story, no gunman was mentioned on the roof. However, early media reports and police communications did mention a roof sniper, as did many eyewitnesses. For example, Candace Cushman, another student, was one such witness who relayed her story on May 6th. This individual, he too was wearing a black trench coat, said Candace. Let's see. Other students who saw this individual were Nathan Vanderaw, Penny Zura, Jessica Lucero, Michelle Fox, Lindsay Conwell, Stephen Eubanks, Nicole Nowlin, George Snedden, and Andrew Lowry.
But of course, there was no person on the roof. According to the official story, and we know we can believe the official story as always.
None of them got a good look at this individual to tell, who it was. But one of the eyewitnesses said that he heard one of the gunmen on the ground call out to him. But as you might guess, the name that he heard was,
for 10,000 points, can you guess the next word?
Redacted from the testimony. Even the first name.
Oh, that's forbidden. Can't mention the first name. We'll just pretend this person didn't even exist, let alone releasing his name.
Unbelievable, guys. This is like the kangaroo courts in the Dark Ages, It doesn't matter what you say or don't say in your interrogation. You're guilty. Because the Inquisitor wants to torture you. It's lots and lots of fun. And besides, we already set up the faggots outside, and we don't want all that labor wasted for nothing. We got a crowd gathered already. They want to see you burn today. Unfreaking believable, man. Anyway, let's look now at stories of shots being heard after 1 p.m. Again, long after the time that Klebold and Harris had supposedly committed suicide. As I stated earlier, both of them are said to have killed themselves at about 12:08 p.m. However, shots were being heard long after this time. Here's some examples of these testimonies. Patricia Nielsen, a teacher, gave her testimony on May 5th. She said that after being shot at by Harris, she ran into the library and dialed 911. She hid under a desk while the gunmen were in the library. Then she crawled into the library's workroom and hid inside a cupboard. After staying in there for quite some time, she heard someone in the room but didn't dare move from her hiding spot, for fear, of course. The time was about 1 p.m. Shortly thereafter, she heard gunfire very close by. This is almost an hour after Klebold and Harris are said to have committed suicide. How is she still hearing gunfire, folks? Lois Keene, Lois Keene, a library assistant, told her story on May 27th. She said that she heard a whole round of shots, like from an automatic weapon, firing sometime between 1 and 1:30. Doreen Salazar, a student, heard this same type of automatic firing in about the same time, sometime after 1 and before 1:30. Lisa Kreutz said that she could hear some gunmen talking after the 2:30 bell as she hid in the library and heard some shots being fired in the distance. 2:30. Now we're dealing with over, well over 2 hours later, almost 2.5 hours later, after the two gunmen supposedly had shot and killed themselves. And, there couldn't have been any more shootings, right? Because the two shooters, the only two shooters, were dead. And once again, folks, how did this go on for so long like this without anything being done? If Klebold and Harris were dead at 12:08, why was it for so long shootings were still going on? Where were the police? This is unbelievable. Guess what? I'll be talking about this next week, but you had the same thing going on with the Virginia Tech shootings. Hours on end. Hours. The place wasn't, locked down. There was no security. You didn't have, local, state, federal officials in there cordoning off the area and securing it, blah, 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 blah. No, nothing of the sort. The shooting went on uninterruptedly for hours on end. In the case of Virginia Tech, the shooting wasn't nonstop, but the whole affair did, go on for several hours without any intervention. Anyway, let's look at some more strange accounts and mysteries surrounding the Columbine incident. Crystal Aculeta said that during the main shooting period, she saw a dark brown pickup truck circling slowly in the school parking lot with a loud rumbling sound coming from its engine. Pretty much the whole time the shooting was going on, once again, remember, there was this man in a suit, three-piece suit, wearing sunglasses. He was seen outside walking around with a clipboard taking notes, and there was this brown pickup circling around the parking lot. What the hell was going on here? Anyway, then there's this tale. To this day, the full autopsy for Klebold has not been released, as well as those of most of the victims. Why is that? Not all of the ballistics information has been made available to the public. Again, why? It's obvious why, because there were multiple gunmen, that's why. Come on, folks. Let's see. Some of the bullets found on the scene cannot be matched to either Klebold, Harris, or law enforcement. Yet the case is considered closed, i.e., you're not to know any more about it, shut up. The April 23rd, 1999 Denver Post reported that there were many bombs and other explosive devices, 95 in total, strategically planted all throughout the school, which suggests that the two shooters must have had assistance. How could they have planted 95 explosives all throughout the school, folks? But this was not followed up either. Klebold's suicide wound was on the left side of his head, when, of course, he was right-handed. Highly unlikely, folks. Could this be why his full autopsy report has not been released? It appears that he was killed. Well, guess what? I don't want to ruin the surprise, but when we get to the Virginia Tech shooting, there was something very similar that went on there. But I don't want to spoil it. We'll talk about that next week. Something very similar went on there in this regard as well. Anyway, so, obviously Klebold was shot by somebody else. But why? By whom? Perhaps Harris was killed as well, and that they were simply set up to take the blame for the whole operation. Obviously, they were involved. They were seen walking about the halls and the classrooms. They were seen doing some of the shooting. But I think, folks, that the whole thing was set up. They were probably told in advance that, they were going to have their tracks covered like the other perpetrators. Oh, don't worry, you're one of us. We'll take care of you. Just do the shooting, have some fun. No, folks, they were set up as patsies. They were involved, but, they were the sole perpetrators, according to the official story. They were set up to take the fall for the entire thing. And the other perpetrators had their names redacted. They covered up for them, folks. Unbelievable. It gets more twisted as we go along here. Some Columbine students have died violent, unsolved deaths since the shooting incident, while many others have reported receiving death threats over the phone. Yet nothing is done to investigate any of this. Isn't that interesting? More Orwellian twisted facts when we get back, folks. Stick with us. All right, guys. To our final segment here. As always, if you want these notes, just email me, truthhertzradio@AOL.com. Spell Hertz, Hertz. Be happy to send them off to you. This is unbelievable stuff, folks. Let's look at a few more disgusting facts surrounding this case. Patty DePuter, mother of slain student Corey DePuter, stated, quote, "I gave up on getting a straight story from them, the authorities. It changed every time we talked to them." Brian Rohrbaugh, father of slain student Danny Rohrbaugh, had this to say, "It looks like going to court is the only way we're going to find out what happened." You see, these parents of these slain students know they're being lied to. They know that the whole story stinks to high heaven, and they're disgusted with what's going on. Can you not see, folks, our government is outrageously, scandalously, and hopelessly corrupt. It's gone. It's rotten to the flippin' core. Randy Brown, father of Brooks Brown, had this to say, "They're still lying to us about what happened and withholding information. If people think this is the end, they are wrong. The Sheriff's Department is hiding a great deal of information." Well, the Sheriff's Department, I'm not exonerating them, but they're just doing what they're told. The Sheriff's Department would probably like to come out with the truth. Maybe not, I don't know, but, you know, in local levels, that's usually how it is. You'll have decent, honest people on a local level, sometimes on a state level, but when it comes to the federal level, the pressure always comes from the top guys. Most of the time, they're just little butt-kiss lapdogs anyway who don't care, but there are occasions where you do have local officials who are disgusted, but they know if they open their mouths, they're going to get their suicide arranged for them. So, you know, they just go along because they have to. Nevertheless, they're being lied to by the local sheriff's department about what went on, said this parent. And undoubtedly, if nothing else, it's definitely pressure from Washington. William Erickson, retired Chief Justice of the Colorado Supreme Court and chair of the Governor's Columbine Review Commission, said, quote, "I've never seen such a great effort to withhold evidence that has material relevance to the work of the commission." This story, like the Virginia Tech incident, which I'll talk about next week once again, has all the makings, folks, of a classic CIA psyop operation. Hence the guy with the, sunglasses and the three-piece suit. But, what would the purpose have been? That's the question. Well, after both of these tragedies, Columbine and Virginia Tech, a lot of talk was heard in the media about passing more stringent gun control laws. There you go. That's the agenda. Fortunately, the effort backfired, and the Second Amendment, at least for now, remains intact for the most part. But I wonder what kind of scheme that they'll plan next, because that's really the ultimate agenda here. Create crises like this and then say, oh, we got to have gun control laws. Look, there's so many crazies out there. Of course, folks, the FBI played a role in this incident as well. As it turns out, listen to this. This is very, very disturbing. According to a May 8th, 1999 Associated Press report, the son of the FBI's lead agent, Dwayne Fuselier, investigating Columbine, the main agent investigating Columbine, his son had produced a videotape in 1997 which depicted gun-toting, trench coat-wearing students moving through Columbine's halls, and ends with a special effects explosion of the school. Naturally, his son survived the shooting and was not in any way connected to the crime, nor was any investigation launched against him. Did you catch this? The lead FBI investigator of the Columbine incident, his son, 2 years earlier, a student at the same school, had produced a film showing students wearing trench coats shooting up the school and later blowing it up.
exactly what happened 2 years later. But nothing happened. No investigation was launched. This film was not deemed as suspicious. You've got to be kidding me, folks. Good old Janet Reno, the butcher of Waco, had this to say about the Columbine investigation. It has been a textbook case of how to conduct an investigation, of how to do it the right way. Yeah, when you want to cover up government involvement, sure. It was a great investigation, wasn't it, you little swine bag? Well, folks, there you have it. Oh, and by the way, a story came out, let's see, when was this? I believe, oh, wait a minute. I'm looking through my notes here. Yeah, I guess it was April 3rd, 2007. The Denver Post, I believe, carried this. A local judge in there in Colorado, actually it was the Rocky Mountain News that reported this. Local judge there ordered that Columbine-related documents be seized for 20 years. Can you be locked up, I should say. He seized them and ordered them, to be locked up for 20 years. This is like the Kennedy assassination, right? Pertinent documents pertaining to the case are and have been locked up and will continue to be locked up until, 2028 or 38, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's 2038. Unbelievable. After, by which time all the perpetrators will be long dead. And, of course, it won't matter anyway because when they do release that information, apparently thousands of pages of documents, most of that's going to be blacked out, too. So, Folks, you don't engage in activities like this unless your fingers are stained with blood, unless you have something to hide. I mean, do I have to spell this out? Remember the 9/11 Commission, the so-called investigation? Ashcroft was insisting that there not be an independent investigation. He didn't want an independent investigation, and, of course, it wasn't independent. Every one of them was handpicked by Bushy Boy, personal friends of his, for crying out loud. And then don't forget, this commission wasn't even assembled until 14 months after the attacks, by which time all the debris in New York and at the Pentagon and in Shanksville had been completely removed and destroyed. I mean, how can you call that an investigation? It's like calling in a team of, investigators after a murder, when the murder scene has been cleaned up. All the blood stains are cleaned up and the body's removed. You didn't even do a white chalk line around where the body once stood. Clean the area completely. Sterilize it. And then you call in the investigators. What kind of investigation could they possibly launch at that point? All the evidence is removed and destroyed, right? Well, that's the 9/11 Commission for you. But, that wasn't enough, as I've pointed out on previous shows, and I'll mention this again and again. So important. Even though Bush handpicked all the commission members, he still didn't want to take any chances that information might leak out to the public he didn't want them to have. So, he cut back on the money allotted to them, cut back on the time allotted to them for the investigation, so-called. Wouldn't allow them access to certain staff, unless there was someone from the Justice Department present telling them what they couldn't say. He wouldn't give them access to most of the documents they requested. The few that he did give them access to, most of the information was blacked out. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. But this is an investigation. Can't you see this is all we ever get? Look at the Kennedy Warren Commission. At least that was assembled the day after Kennedy's assassination, unlike 9/11, 14 months later. But nevertheless, that was all a rigged game, too. Who headed it up but Allen Dulles, the head of the CIA that Kennedy had fired. No conflict of interest there. You had statements in the Warren Commission made by eyewitnesses there at Dealey Plaza that they never even made. Almost everybody whose testimony was cited in the commission report reported problems with their statements. They said that, there were statements in there attributed to them that they never made. Many statements that they did make weren't included. They said that the things were stamped with a Note of Republic stamp, but yet there was no Note of Republic present when they gave their statements. On and on and on it goes. This is all we ever get from El Governmente. When a panel was put together to investigate Waco, who assembled it but Janet Reno, the swine bag who gave the order for them to shoot rounds of CS gas. Oh, which, of course, disabled everybody in there, and it's highly flammable. The whole thing went up the second time. All right, guys, that's all the time we got for today. Great guest. If you got a situation like that, you're going to have more law enforcement, get the feds in there or whatever, right? How come this wasn't being done? Why wasn't the place swarmed with agents? They certainly did that at Waco, didn't they? Sorry, folks, it just doesn't add up already, but stick around, we're just getting warmed up. But already we can see some very serious problems here. How could they be outgunned with only 2 students? There must have been other people. Who were they? And why aren't we being told about them in the national media? Oh, there definitely were. Wait till you hear, about that when I go into that in more detail in a few minutes here. Anyway, along this same line, the May 2000 issue of Playboy magazine quoted Terry Manwaring, commander of the Jefferson County SWAT team. And here's what he said. I just knew the killers were armed and were better equipped than we were. How could that be? Better equipped? What, just 2 kids with, sure, they had automatics or semi-automatics, but nothing that the police didn't also have. How could they be better equipped? Hello? It was also initially reported in the local press that numerous students had seen more than 2 gunmen. But all of this has been brushed away and swept under the rug by the national media. We're going to be taking a close look at some of these eyewitness accounts, folks, that don't jibe with the official story. But first, let us look at what the official account of that day's events looks like. Students Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, according to the official story, planned and executed this attack alone. Very important to understand that. We have been told and continue to be told that they operated alone. Nobody else was involved in the planning or in the execution, certainly not in the execution of these attacks. Nobody else was involved, we're told. We are told that some other people bought guns for them since they were minors, but, they didn't really know what their intent was, So the buyers had no idea, whatsoever what they were up to, so that, once again, we're not going to report that. We'll just sweep that under the rug. We don't want people to know about that. But it was reported in the local press 3.5 hours after the patsies, let's call them, because that's what they were, Klebold and Harris. 3.5 hours after they were dead. Now, there's 2 problems here with that. 2 very obvious problems that leap right in your face. One of them is, obviously, if they were the only 2 perpetrators and they were already dead, who were these other shooters? And the other problem is, how could there be shooting going on at all 3.5 hours later? Where in God's name were the police? Also, Sheriff John Stone had initially reported that there were other shooters involved, aside, again, from the 2 main ones, Klebold and Harris. But he has since mysteriously backed away from that statement as though he never made it. This is like the, I forget his name now, but there was a professor from University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, the afternoon of 9/11. He came out and said, these explosive, these towers falling the way they did, it looked like explosives were used. He's a controlled demolition expert. He said there's no question, after viewing these tapes, they have all the classic indicators of a controlled demolition. It couldn't be anything else. But several days later, he retracted, or actually he denied ever saying it, and changed his whole story. Why? Well, it's obvious why, because his department gets $12 million in federal grant money every year. They must have gotten a little phone call. Anyway, this same sheriff, John Stone, was quoted by the Associated Press on April 20th. The the day of the attacks, as making this statement. We had initial people there right away, but we couldn't get in. We were way outgunned. Way outgunned. So there you go, folks. Supposedly there were only 2 kids doing this, but he said we were way outgunned. We couldn't get in there. Well, that might partially answer the question as to why it took so long for an effective police response. But, why weren't they getting more police in there regarding what happened there? All right, guys, short break, and we're going to launch into this when we get back. Stick with us. On second thought, I thought I heard the music coming in for the break. I guess not. It was a truck going by. Anyway, this is major stuff. Like I said, if you're not familiar with it, you got to become familiar with it. If you already are familiar with it, keep listening, folks, because I'm going to go into this in a lot of detail, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that you haven't heard before. So you definitely want to keep tuned in. This is something we need to be aware of because, these things seem to be going on all the time. The 2 major ones, of course, are Virginia Tech and Columbine, but there's been a lot more, and unfortunately there's going to be a lot more. They have an agenda behind this, and we're going to talk about that later on in the broadcast. Stick with us. All right, guys, welcome back to Truth Hurts. The tragic shooting at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado on April 20th, 1999, though now outdone by the Virginia Tech shooting, was at that time the worst type of incident of that nature in the entire country, in the history of this country. It left many with scars that are still etched in the minds of those who watched the story unfold in the national news. But there's a lot of problems with the official story, as I said before the break. Many problems that unfolded in the press, mostly in the local press. Most of these problems you never heard in the national press, and that's always the way it goes, isn't it? When there's a tragedy like Katrina, for example. A lot of stuff was reported in local media that you never heard in the national media, like the Oklahoma City bombing, for another example. Anyway, there were many conflicting reports in the local media that totally conflicted with the national media. For example, a Denver Post article reported that shots were still being fired in the school a full 3.5 hours after the 2 gunmen were said to have died. Obviously, that's a big problem. Operated completely alone as far as the actual planning went, and certainly as far as the execution went. Nobody else had any hand in it. The 2 gunmen were dressed in black trench coats and pants, as we're told. The shooting started at approximately 11:19 a.m., and by 12:08 p.m., at the latest, Harris and Klebold were dead, having killed themselves after executing the attacks. This is the official story. But as we'll see, it just doesn't add up. In fact, it's absolutely freaking possible. Okay. Let's move on to talk about the bomb thrower in the white T-shirt. Outside the school, numerous eyewitnesses saw a young man dressed in a white T-shirt and blue jeans who was taking part in the attack. He was said to have been seen giving a signal to start the rampage, and then he had thrown some type of explosives. Talk more about him when we get back, folks. The story is full of holes. All right, guys, welcome back. I was talking before the break about this bomb thrower in a white T-shirt. This same individual, who was a youth,
was later seen together with the other two perpetrators, Klebold and Harris, on the school grounds. So there's no question that this was, in fact, a third individual. It was not one of the two, the only two that we were told were involved. On the day after the attacks, April 21st, USA Today had this to say: beyond the two dead gunmen, students described seeing another youth dressed in a white T-shirt throwing bombs that looked like soda cans, or pipe bombs, perhaps. A youth matching that description later was seen being led away by police. Now, why was this issue dropped? This actually was reported in this national journal, but, you know, like 9/11, as time went on, things that were initially reported the day of 9/11 or even a day or two after. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Truth Hurts Show. Happy Thursday. Gotta love these weathermen. Yesterday they said rainy, and it was actually sunny all day. They said sunny for today, and now it looks rainy. Kind of like politicians, huh? We got to rank the weathermen up there with politicians. Say one thing and do the absolute opposite. Yeah. Kind of like the topic we're going to be talking about today. Those who pay attention to mainstream media got an entirely different story from what actually happened that fateful day in 1990. Oh boy, wait a minute. When was it? I can look at my notes here. I forgot the date. April 20th of 1999. I almost said 97. It was 1999. The famous and horrific, tragic Columbine incident. What exactly went on at Columbine? Folks, the evidence of government perpetration of this event is so overwhelming and so absolutely undeniable. If you're not familiar with this, your eyes are going to pop out of your head. It's unbelievable. We were lied to. We were suckered once again. Of course, the same can be said about a whole lot of other things, like Virginia Tech, for example. We're going to be looking at that next week. Tomorrow I have a guest, so I won't get around to that, but I'm planning on Monday. Got a guest Tuesday as well. On Monday, or if I don't finish this show today, I'll finish this on Monday, and then I'll get started on the Virginia Tech. But the next two shows, this one and the one after at least, I'm going to be covering these two events. The parallels are just astonishing. Unmistakable. You can't miss this. We see the exact same things going on, the same lies, the same cover-ups, the events themselves, what actually happened at these two schools, are very, very close. And it's just amazing. You know, I suspected there was something wrong with Columbine. In fact, I knew there was. But I never realized just how incredibly outrageous it was, how extensive the lies were.